He was just a single dad flying home to see his son. But when the plane started falling from the sky and he took the cockpit controls, he said one name that made F-22 fighter pilots freeze in disbelief: Ghost Rider. This is the story of how a legend came back from the dead. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun painted the windows of Southwest Flight 614 in golden light. Inside the Boeing 737, passengers settled into their seats. Business travelers typed on laptops. Families organized snacks for restless children. Flight attendants smiled and checked seatbelts. In seat 12B sat Marcus Reed. To anyone looking, he was just another tired passenger. Mid-40s, wearing a simple blue jacket. A worn backpack sat at his feet. On his wrist was an old military watch, scratched but still keeping perfect time. His eyes, calm and quiet, stared out the window as the plane prepared to leave Dallas. Marcus was flying to San Diego. His 8-year-old son, Tyler, was waiting there. It had been 3 months since Marcus last saw him. 3 long months of video calls and goodnight texts. Today, finally, they would spend the whole weekend together. Marcus worked as a commercial airline pilot, but not for this airline. He was deadheading home, which means flying as a passenger to get back to his base. He could have waited for a later flight, but he wanted every extra hour with Tyler. So here he was, squeezed into a middle seat, patient and still. Next to him sat an elderly woman reading a magazine. Across the aisle, a young mother struggled with twin toddlers. Behind him, a businessman complained loudly about the Wi-Fi not working. Marcus listened to all of it with the quiet patience of someone who had learned that small problems were not worth worry. The captain's voice came through the speakers. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Stevens. We'll be in the air for about 2.5 hours. Weather looks clear, so sit back and enjoy the flight." Marcus closed his eyes. He had made this trip 100 times. He knew every sound the engines made, every shift in air pressure, every bump of turbulence before it happened. Flying was in his blood. But most people didn't know the full story. 10 years ago, Marcus Reed had a different name in the military. They called him Ghost Rider. He flew F-16 fighters in classified missions across 3 war zones. He had skills that only a few dozen pilots in the world possessed. He could land a jet with 1 engine. He could fly through sandstorms without instruments. He once saved an entire squadron by drawing enemy fire away from them. His record was legendary. 73 combat missions. 0 losses. 3 times he brought back aircraft so damaged that engineers couldn't believe they had flown at all. Other pilots studied his techniques. Commanders requested him by name. Young aviators dreamed of flying with him. Then one day, he just stopped. He walked away from the medals, the fame, the respect. He requested early discharge. He became a civilian pilot and focused on one thing: being there for his son. Because Tyler's mother had passed away when the boy was only 2 years old. Marcus had missed too much of Tyler's life while serving overseas. He promised himself he would never miss another birthday, another school play, another bedtime story. So Marcus Reed, the legendary Ghost Rider, became just another dad trying his best. The plane pushed back from the gate. Engines hummed. The aircraft rolled toward the runway. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of movement, the slight tilt as the nose lifted, the moment when the wheels left the ground. They were flying. 20 minutes into the flight, Marcus noticed something wrong. It was subtle. Most passengers would never catch it. But Marcus wasn't most passengers. The left engine sound had changed. Just slightly, a tiny vibration that shouldn't be there. He frowned and listened closer. The rhythm was off. Like a heartbeat with an irregular pulse. Marcus had heard this sound before, years ago, on a training exercise that ended with an emergency landing. His body tensed automatically. Then he felt it. A small shudder through the airframe. His eyes opened. His hand instinctively moved to his armrest, feeling the vibrations through his fingertips. Years of training kicked in automatically. He leaned forward and looked out the window toward the left wing. Everything looked normal. The wing was steady. The engine appeared fine from his angle. But his instincts were screaming. Marcus glanced around the cabin. No one else seemed concerned. The elderly woman next to him was still reading. The businessman behind him was sleeping. The flight attendants were preparing the drink service. But Marcus knew. Something was wrong. 30 seconds later, the cabin lights flickered. The elderly woman looked up, confused. "Did you see that?" she asked Marcus. He nodded, his jaw tight. "Stay calm. Keep your seatbelt on." Then came a sound no one ever wants to hear on a plane. A deep, grinding boom from somewhere in the belly of the aircraft. The plane shook violently. Overhead bins rattled. A few items fell. Luggage shifted. Passengers gasped. The mother with the twins grabbed both children and held them tight. The businessman woke up with a startled shout. All around the cabin, people looked at each other with the same question in their eyes: what was that? "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated," the flight attendant's voice said quickly, trying to sound calm. But Marcus heard the fear underneath. He had trained enough crews to recognize panic disguised as procedure. Then the plane lurched hard to the left. Coffee cups flew from tray tables. A laptop crashed to the floor. Someone screamed. The aircraft tilted at an angle that was definitely not normal. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like pale ghosts, swinging on their tubes. Marcus gripped his armrests. His mind was already racing through possibilities. Engine failure, hydraulic problem, electrical malfunction, maybe all three. He ran through emergency procedures in his head, procedures he hadn't used in 10 years but would never forget. The intercom crackled with static. Then silence. More passengers started to panic now. A baby began crying. Someone screamed. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, trying to keep everyone calm, but their faces were pale and their hands were shaking. A man 3 rows ahead stood up and yelled, "What's happening? Someone tell us what's happening." "Sir, please sit down," a flight attendant said, but her voice was trembling. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. "Sir, you need to sit down," a young flight attendant said, her voice shaking. She was barely in her 20s, probably on one of her first flights. Her name tag read, Jessica. "Jessica, listen to me," Marcus said firmly but gently. "I'm a pilot. I need to get to the cockpit. Now." She hesitated, looking between him and the tilting cabin. "Sir, I can't just. That engine sound means you have maybe 5 minutes before this plane becomes unflyable," Marcus interrupted, his voice low but urgent. "Get me to the cockpit or we're all going down." Something in his eyes made her believe him. Maybe it was the calmness. Maybe it was the certainty. But she nodded and led him forward through the chaos. Behind them, passengers were crying, praying, calling loved ones. Marcus heard fragments of conversation as he moved through the cabin. "I love you, tell the kids I love them. Please, God, please. Mommy, I'm scared." Marcus forced himself to focus. Emotion was the enemy right now. These people needed him to be clear, precise, and perfect. There would be time for feelings later. Right now, there was only the problem and the solution. Inside the cockpit, chaos ruled. Captain Stevens was slumped over, unconscious, blood on his forehead from where his head had hit the control panel during the violent shake. The first officer, a young woman named Sarah Chen, was pale and struggling with the controls. Sweat dripped down her face. Her hands were shaking on the yoke. "We lost the left engine," she shouted when Marcus entered. Hydraulics are failing. I can't get the rudder to respond. We're losing altitude fast. I don't know what to do. I don't. Breathe, Marcus said, his voice cutting through her panic like a knife through butter. You're doing fine. I'm here to help. Marcus didn't waste time explaining who he was. He moved to the captain's seat and gently pulled the unconscious man back. Then he slid into position. His hands found the controls like coming home after a long journey. His eyes swept across the instrument panel in 2 seconds and understood the situation completely. It was bad. Really bad. But he had seen worse. He had flown worse. And he had survived. One engine gone, hydraulic pressure dropping fast. Flight controls barely responding. Electrical systems flickering. They were flying a 150,000-pound metal tube with almost no way to steer it. The aircraft wanted to roll left because of the unbalanced thrust. Every instinct in the plane's design was working against them now. Can you fly this? Sarah asked desperately, her voice breaking. Marcus looked at her with steady eyes. I've flown worse. For just a moment, Marcus's mind flashed back. Desert sky, smoke, fire, his F-16 banking hard with half a wing missing. The voice of his squadron leader in his headset, Ghost Rider, eject. Eject now. And Marcus's response, calm as morning, negative. I'm bringing her home. He had brought it home that day. And he would bring this one home too. Marcus reached for the radio and switched to the emergency frequency. His voice came out calm, clear, controlled. Like he was ordering coffee, not fighting to save a plane. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Southwest 614. We have catastrophic engine failure and hydraulic loss. Requesting immediate fighter escort and emergency landing clearance. A voice came back from air traffic control, tight with tension. Southwest 614, copy your mayday. We're vectoring you toward Edwards Air Force Base. Can you maintain altitude? Barely, Marcus replied. He adjusted the throttle on the remaining engine, using thrust to keep the plane level. It was like trying to balance a pencil on your finger while riding a bicycle. Possible, but incredibly difficult. His arms already burned from the effort. Sarah watched him work, her panic slowly transforming into amazement. His hands moved with absolute confidence. No hesitation. No doubt. Just pure skill. Then Marcus said something he hadn't said in 10 years. Air traffic control, this is Ghost Rider requesting emergency protocols. Sarah's head snapped toward him. Ghost Rider? What? There was a long pause on the radio. Then a different voice came through, older, more authoritative. Say again. Did you just identify as Ghost Rider? Affirmative. Authorization code Delta 79 Charlie. I need fighter support now. Another pause. Then, quietly, with something like awe in the voice, copy that, Ghost Rider. Help is on the way. Welcome back, sir. Sarah stared at Marcus. Who are you? He gave her a tired smile. Right now? I'm just a dad trying to get home to his son. In the cabin, passengers clutched their seats. Some prayed. Others cried. Many tried calling loved ones to say goodbye. The elderly woman Marcus had sat next to was holding hands with the stranger across the aisle. The businessman was crying into his phone. The young mother held her twins and sang softly to them, trying to keep them calm even though her own voice was shaking. But in the cockpit, Marcus was completely focused. He wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about Tyler. About the promise he made to always come home. About the baseball game this weekend he had promised to attend. About the bedtime stories he still needed to tell. About watching his son grow up. He was not going to miss that game. He was not going to break that promise. 8 minutes later, two F-22 Raptor fighters appeared on either side of the struggling 737. Inside one of the F-22s, Lieutenant Jake "Hawk" Morrison stared at the commercial plane through his canopy. He had been on a routine training flight when the emergency call came through. Just practicing maneuvers, nothing special. Then his radio had exploded with activity. But when he heard the name, Ghost Rider, on the radio, everything changed. His hands had actually frozen on the controls for a second. His wingman, Captain Lisa Viper Chen, had come on the channel immediately. "Did he just say Ghost Rider?" Viper asked, her voice tight with disbelief. "Yeah," Jake replied quietly. "He did." Every fighter pilot knew that name. Ghost Rider was a legend. The stories about him were told at every Air Force base. Instructors used his missions as teaching examples. His techniques were studied in tactics courses. The pilot who could do the impossible, the man who flew a burning F-16 for 200 miles and landed it safely, the ghost who disappeared from service 10 years ago and was never seen again. There were rumors, of course. Some said he had died in a classified mission and the military covered it up. Others said he went crazy from stress and walked into the desert. A few claimed he was working for the CIA on secret operations. But no one really knew. And now, somehow, impossibly, he was flying a crippled commercial jet. "Ghost Rider, this is Hawk," Jake said into his radio, trying to keep his voice professional despite the shock. "We've got you. What do you need?" Marcus glanced out the window and saw the sleek fighter jet keeping pace with him. Relief flooded through his chest. "Hawk, I need a visual on my left wing. Tell me how bad the damage is." "Copy that, moving in for visual inspection." The F-22 dropped lower and moved closer, just 50 feet away. Jake examined the engine carefully through his canopy. What he saw made his stomach drop. The engine cowling was completely blown apart. Metal was twisted and blackened. Hydraulic fluid was streaming out in a fine mist that caught the sunlight. The wing itself looked stressed, with visible cracks in the metal. "Ghost Rider, your engine is completely destroyed," Jake reported, his voice grim. "I can see hydraulic fluid leaking from multiple points. Your landing gear might not deploy properly. There's structural damage to the wing root." "Copy that," Marcus said calmly, like Jake had just told him about a minor scratch. "I'll deal with it." Sarah, the first officer, looked at him with wide eyes. "How are you so calm? Did you hear what he said?" "The wing is damaged." Marcus gave her a small smile. "Because panic doesn't solve problems. Focus does. Fear makes you freeze. Training makes you move. Right now, we need to move." He turned his attention back to the controls. They were losing altitude slowly but steadily, about 200 feet per minute. The plane wanted to roll left because of the lost engine, so Marcus had to constantly adjust thrust to keep them level. Every muscle in his arms burned from the effort, but he didn't let go. Couldn't let go. Jake Morrison positioned his F-22 alongside the 737 and stayed there, matching speed perfectly. Inside his cockpit, he studied the commercial pilot through the scratched windows. He couldn't see much detail, just a silhouette, but something about the way the man's shoulders were set, the way he held the controls, spoke of absolute mastery. "Viper, you seeing this?" Jake asked his wingman. "Yeah," Captain Chen replied from the other side of the 737. "He's flying manual with one engine and no hydraulics. That shouldn't even be possible. He's Ghost Rider. Possible is what he does." Jake had been 5 years old when Ghost Rider was at his peak. His own father had served with the man briefly and had talked about him with reverence. "The best I ever saw," his father had said. When Ghost Rider was in the air, you knew everything would be okay. He just had this presence. This certainty. Now, watching the damaged 737 hold steady against all odds, Jake understood what his father meant. Edwards Air Force Base, this is Ghost Rider, Marcus called. I'm coming in for emergency landing. Prepare all fire crews. This is going to be rough. Copy, Ghost Rider. Runway is clear. We're ready for you. Emergency crews are standing by. Behind him, Sarah was shaking. I've never landed with only one engine and no hydraulics. This is my second year as first officer. I don't know if I can. You can, Marcus said firmly. And you will. Follow my lead. You're going to learn something today that most pilots never experience. When this is over, you're going to be able to handle anything. The two F-22s stayed with them every mile. Inside his cockpit, Jake Morrison watched in amazement as the damaged 737 slowly descended. He had trained for years to become a fighter pilot. He had graduated top of his class. He had flown combat missions. But watching Ghost Rider fly that crippled plane was like watching an artist paint a masterpiece with a broken brush. Every adjustment was perfect. Every correction was precise. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation. This wasn't just flying. This was mastery. This was legend made real. All units, be advised, the tower called. Ghost Rider is 5 minutes out. This is a real-world emergency. If this landing is successful, you are witnessing aviation history. Jake looked at the struggling 737 one more time. Come on, Ghost Rider, he whispered. Show us how it's done. 10 miles from Edwards Air Force Base, Marcus faced his biggest problem yet. Landing gear, he said to Sarah. Try to deploy it. She pressed the button with a shaking hand. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. The indicator light stayed dark. Hydraulic system is dead, she said, her voice rising with panic. Gear won't come down. We're going to have to belly land. We're. Breathe, Marcus said again. We're not done yet. He reached under the control panel and found the emergency gear release handle. It was a backup system, purely mechanical. He had used it once before, 13 years ago, when his F-16 lost all electrical power over the Persian Gulf. It had worked then. It would work now. It took all his strength to pull it. The handle resisted, stiff from lack of use. Marcus pulled harder, muscles straining. There was a loud thunk that vibrated through the entire aircraft, and the plane shook. Hawk, did the gear deploy? Marcus asked, breathing hard from the effort. Jake maneuvered his F-22 underneath the 737 and looked up through his canopy. He could see the main landing gear hanging down, but something was wrong with the nose gear. It was extended but tilted at an odd angle. Affirmative. Main gear is down and locked. But your nose gear looks damaged. It's not straight. That's fine. We'll deal with it. Sarah looked at him. Deal with it? If the nose gear collapses. Then I'll keep the nose up as long as possible and set it down gently. Trust me. Marcus could see the runway now. Long, straight, and lined with emergency vehicles. Fire trucks with foam cannons ready. Ambulances waiting, dozens of people standing by to see if he could pull off the impossible. A small crowd had gathered despite security protocols. News helicopters circled in the distance. In the cabin, a flight attendant's voice came over the speakers, trying to stay calm. Everyone, brace positions, heads down, stay down. When we land, stay in your seats until we tell you to move. Passengers leaned forward, hands over their heads or clutching the seat in front of them. Children cried. Adults whispered prayers. The elderly woman Marcus had sat next to was holding a photo of her grandchildren. The businessman had stopped crying and was just staring straight ahead, his face blank with shock. The young mother with the twins was singing softly, "Hush little baby, don't you cry." Marcus took a deep breath. His hands were steady on the controls despite the burning in his muscles. He reduced speed gradually, using tiny adjustments to keep the plane aligned with the runway. Without hydraulics, he couldn't use the normal flaps and slats to slow down properly. He was coming in fast. Too fast. The airspeed indicator showed 180 knots, almost 40 knots faster than normal. But it was the only way. Too slow and they would stall. Too fast and they might not stop in time. The margin for error was razor thin. "Ghost Rider, you're cleared to land," air traffic control said. "Runway 21 left. Wind is calm. You have 8,000 feet of runway. We're with you all the way, sir." "Copy. Here we go." Marcus's mind became perfectly clear. The world narrowed to just the runway, the controls, and his training. Everything else fell away. The fear, the doubt, the what-ifs, all gone. There was only this moment, this landing, this responsibility. The ground rushed up to meet them. Marcus flared the nose just slightly, using the last bit of control authority he had. It was more instinct than skill now, a feeling in his bones about when to adjust, when to hold steady. The rear wheels touched first with a hard thump that rattled everyone's teeth. For 1 second, everything was okay. Then the damaged nose gear collapsed immediately with a horrible screeching sound. The front of the plane dropped and scraped against the runway. Sparks flew everywhere, a shower of orange and white light. The horrible sound of metal grinding on concrete filled the cabin. Passengers screamed. The plane vibrated so hard that overhead bins popped open and luggage tumbled out. But Marcus didn't panic. His right hand was already on the thrust lever for the one working engine. He used asymmetric thrust to keep the plane straight as it skidded down the runway, fighting the natural tendency to spin. His left hand held the yoke steady, keeping the wings level. His feet pressed hard on the rudder pedals even though they did nothing, muscle memory refusing to quit. The plane slowed. Slower, slower, leaving a trail of smoke and debris and sparks behind it like a comet. Fire trucks raced alongside, ready to spray foam. And then, finally, after what felt like forever, it stopped. 2,000 feet of runway remaining. The plane was broken, smoking, scarred. But it was stopped. And everyone inside was alive. For a moment, there was complete silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The world held still. Then passengers erupted. Cheers. Tears. Laughter mixed with sobs. They hugged strangers. They kissed the seats. They couldn't believe they were alive. The elderly woman was crying and thanking God. The businessman was laughing hysterically. The mother with the twins was holding them so tight they squirmed. Marcus shut down the remaining engine and closed his eyes. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. But it was over. Everyone was safe. He had brought them home. Sarah stared at him in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. We just, Marcus corrected gently, reaching over to squeeze her shoulder. You helped. You stayed calm. You followed instructions. Never forget that. You're a pilot today, Sarah. A real one. Emergency crews rushed to the plane. Slides deployed and passengers evacuated quickly. Firefighters sprayed foam on the hot metal. Paramedics checked people as they came down the slides. No one was seriously hurt. A few bumps and bruises, some cuts from falling luggage, but everyone walked away. As Marcus finally stepped out of the cockpit, helping Captain Stevens, who was now conscious but groggy, a senior fire chief was waiting at the door. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a weathered face. He looked at Marcus with recognition dawning in his eyes. Ghost Rider, the man asked quietly, his voice shaking slightly. Marcus nodded once. The fire chief's eyes filled with tears. I served with you in Afghanistan. Charlie Squadron. You saved my crew when we got hit by ground fire. Flew your F-16 between us and the enemy positions, drew all the fire to yourself. I never got to thank you. Marcus smiled tiredly and shook the man's hand. You just did. Sir, what you just did. The fire chief shook his head in wonder. That's impossible. No, Marcus replied, looking back at the damaged plane, at the passengers hugging their loved ones, at the emergency crews working efficiently. Just difficult. 2 hours later, Marcus sat alone in a debriefing room at Edwards Air Force Base. He had answered questions from safety investigators, military officials, airline representatives, and FAA inspectors. Everyone wanted to know how he did it. How he landed a plane that had no business staying in the air. The investigation would take months, but the initial conclusion was already clear: the landing was impossible according to every computer simulation they had run. The aircraft's condition, the lack of controls, the single-engine operation, all of it should have resulted in a crash. But somehow, impossibly, Marcus had brought it down safely. You broke physics, one investigator had said, half joking. No, Marcus replied. I just respected them. But Marcus only cared about one thing now. He pulled out his phone and saw 17 missed calls. Most were from his airline. A few were from reporters who had somehow gotten his number. But one was from his ex-wife's sister, who was watching Tyler. He called her back immediately. Marcus. Oh my God, are you okay? It's all over the news. They're showing the landing video everywhere. They're saying you're some kind of military legend. Tyler has been glued to the TV. He knows it was you. Can I talk to him? Marcus interrupted gently. Of course. Hold on. A moment later, Tyler's voice came on the line, small and scared. Dad? Hey, buddy. I'm okay. They said your plane almost crashed. They said you saved everyone. I did my job, that's all. But they're calling you Ghost Rider. They said you're a hero. They said you used to fly fighter jets and do secret missions. Dad, you never told me any of this. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Tyler, I need to tell you something. A long time ago, before you were born, I was a military pilot. I did things I'm proud of, but I also missed important moments. When your mom died, I realized I needed to choose. So I chose you. You never told me you were famous, Tyler said quietly. I'm not famous, son. I'm just your dad. And that's all I want to be. There was a pause. Then Tyler said something that made Marcus's eyes fill with tears. But Dad, I'm proud of you. What you did today was amazing. Everyone at school is talking about it. My friends can't believe Ghost Rider is my dad. Marcus smiled through his tears. Yeah. What do you think about that? I think, Tyler said slowly, that I already knew you were a hero. You didn't have to fly a broken plane to prove it. You prove it every time you come home. Every time you show up for my games. Every time you help with homework even though you're tired. That's hero stuff too. Marcus had to cover his mouth to keep from sobbing. I love you, kiddo. So much. I love you too, Dad. Can you still come this weekend? Marcus smiled. I'll be there tomorrow morning. I promise. Will you tell me your stories? The real ones? Every single one. When Marcus hung up, he noticed someone standing in the doorway. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, still in his flight suit, holding his helmet. Sir, Jake said, saluting sharply. I wanted to meet you properly. I apologize for interrupting. Marcus stood and shook his hand. You flew well today, Lieutenant. Thank you for staying with me. You and Captain Chin both. You gave me confidence knowing I had the best pilots in the world watching my back. Jake's chest swelled with pride at the compliment. Sir, I have to ask. Why did you leave? You were the best we had. You could have been a general by now. You could have written your own ticket anywhere in the Air Force. Marcus looked at the young pilot for a long moment. Then he gestured to a chair. Sit down, Lieutenant. Let me tell you something they don't teach at the academy. Jake sat, leaning forward, eager to hear wisdom from the legend himself. Flying fighters is important, Marcus began. Protecting our country is important. But it's not everything. I had a son who needed his father more than the Air Force needed another pilot, even a good one. I missed his first steps because I was deployed. I missed his first words. I missed 2 years of his life. When my wife died, I realized something. I could be the best fighter pilot in the world, but if I was a failure as a father, what did any of it matter? Jake nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn on his face. Can I give you some advice? Marcus asked. Please, sir. Flying is important. But it's not everything. Don't wait until you've lost something precious to realize what matters. Be great in the sky, but be present on the ground. When your flying days are over, and they will end someday for all of us, make sure you have something real to come home to. Jake was quiet for a moment, absorbing the words. Then he stood and saluted again. I won't forget that, sir. Thank you. As Jake left, Marcus walked to the window and looked out at the damaged 737 still sitting on the runway, surrounded by investigators. In the distance, he could see the 2 F-22s that had escorted him, now parked side by side near a hangar. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from the airline president. Captain Reed, we'd like to offer you a position as Chief Training Pilot and Safety Officer. Your experience could save lives for years to come. We need you. Please consider it. Marcus smiled and typed back, I'll accept, but only if I can have weekends off for my son's baseball games. The response came quickly, deal. Welcome to the team, Captain. The next morning, Marcus flew to San Diego on a commercial flight. This time, he sat in the passenger seat without any emergencies. Just a quiet, normal flight. But it wasn't quite normal. Other passengers recognized him from the news. A few asked for photos. One elderly man, a Vietnam veteran, saluted him in the aisle. Marcus accepted it all with grace but was grateful when the flight ended. When he walked out of the airport, he saw Tyler waiting with his aunt. The moment Tyler saw him, the boy ran. Marcus dropped his bag and caught his son in a huge hug, lifting him off the ground despite the ache in his arms from yesterday's ordeal. I missed you, Dad, Tyler said into his shoulder. I missed you too, buddy. So much. Tyler pulled back and looked at him seriously. Dad, are you okay? Like, really okay? I saw the landing video. It looked scary. Marcus knelt down so they were eye level. I'm fine. Better than fine. And you know what? Going through something like that reminded me what's really important. And that's you, kiddo. Always you. They spent the whole weekend together. Saturday morning was Tyler's baseball game. Marcus sat in the bleachers with the other parents and cheered louder than anyone when Tyler got a hit. After the game, they went for pizza at Tyler's favorite place. They played catch in the park. They stayed up late watching movies and eating popcorn. And yes, Marcus told stories. He told Tyler about learning to fly for the first time. About his first solo flight and how terrified and excited he was. He told him about flying through a sandstorm and landing by instruments only. He told him about the friends he served with, good people who believed in something bigger than themselves. He talked about the missions, the fear, the exhilaration, the weight of responsibility. But most importantly, he told Tyler about the day he decided to come home for good. I was in Afghanistan, Marcus said as they sat on the hotel balcony, looking at the stars. I had just completed a mission. It went well, everyone was safe, and my commander was talking about recommending me for promotion. And right then, I got a video call from your aunt. You were 4 years old. You were crying because you missed me. You asked when I was coming home. And you know what you said that changed everything? What? Tyler asked quietly. You said, Daddy, I don't need you to be a hero. I just need you to be here. And in that moment, I realized you were right. The world had plenty of pilots. But you only had one dad. So I made a choice. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned against Marcus. I'm glad you chose me. Best decision I ever made, Marcus said, putting his arm around his son. Being Ghost Rider was exciting. But being your dad? That's the real adventure. On Sunday night, as Marcus tucked Tyler into bed, the boy looked up at him seriously. Dad, are you going to disappear again? Like Ghost Rider did? Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and took his son's hand. No. Ghost Rider was who I was. But Marcus Reed, your dad, is who I am. And I'm never disappearing again. I'm home, buddy. For good. Promise? I promise. Tyler smiled and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep. Marcus sat there for a while, just watching his son breathe. 10 years ago, he was one of the most dangerous pilots in the world. People called him a hero, a legend, a ghost. Headlines praised him. Commanders decorated him. Other pilots wanted to be him. But none of those titles mattered as much as the one Tyler gave him. Dad. That was the only name that mattered. As Marcus walked out of Tyler's room, his phone buzzed one more time. A news alert, Ghost Rider lands crippled plane, saves 132 lives, where has he been? Marcus smiled and turned off his phone. Let them wonder. Let them write their stories. Let them make him a legend. He knew the truth. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a myth. He was just a dad who, for one moment, had to remember how to fly. But now he was grounded again, in the best possible way. Grounded by love.by purpose. By a promise to a boy who needed him more than the sky ever did. Marcus looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, planes were flying. Pilots were working hard to keep people safe. The world kept turning. Heroes were being made and forgotten. Legends were being born. But down here, on the ground, Marcus Reed had finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Peace. Purpose, home. The man they called Ghost Rider had landed for good. Not because he couldn't fly anymore. Not because he was too old or too scared. But because he had finally found something worth staying grounded for. His son. And that was worth more than all the medals, all the fame, all the glory in the world. 6 months after the emergency landing, Southwest Airlines unveiled a special aircraft. Painted on the nose was a small logo, a silhouette of an F-16 with the words, Ghost Rider, underneath. The plane's registration number was N737GR. Marcus attended the ceremony but refused to speak to the media. He stood in the background, in his pilot's uniform, watching. Next to him stood Sarah Chen, now a full captain herself, promoted early because of how she handled the emergency. That should be you up there giving speeches, Sarah said. Marcus shook his head. I did my part. Now let the plane do its part, bringing people home safely. In the crowd, Tyler stood with his aunt, taking pictures on his phone to show his friends. He wore a baseball cap with a small Ghost Rider patch his dad had given him. He was proud, but not because his dad was famous. He was proud because his dad was there, standing beside him, exactly where he promised to be. That evening, Marcus flew his last official training flight as chief training pilot. He took a group of new pilots through emergency procedures. He taught them what the manuals couldn't: how to stay calm when everything goes wrong, how to trust your training, how to remember that behind every instrument panel, every switch, every decision, there are real people counting on you. Flying isn't about being fearless, Marcus told his students. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear. It's about making promises and keeping them. It's about bringing people home. After the training session, Marcus drove home to the small house he had bought near Tyler's school. Tyler was waiting on the porch, baseball glove in hand. "Dad. You're home. Can we play catch before dinner?" Marcus smiled, loosened his tie, and grabbed his own glove from the garage. "Always, buddy. Always." As they threw the ball back and forth in the fading light, Marcus realized something. This moment, right here, was better than any mission he'd ever flown. Better than any medal he'd ever received. Better than being called a legend or a hero or a ghost. Because in this moment, he was exactly what he wanted to be. He was home. He was present. He was Dad. And that was the greatest achievement of all.